Joking part of it was like I even said to my buddy, I'm like, if he hits me again, I got to go get him. And my buddy John Bruno, and he was saying, well, then you got to learn some moves of karate, and we were joking around with it. And then after the game, he calls me and he's like, I didn't know he was going to throw the bat at you. We didn't plan for that one. So it was.
The 5 greatest MLB teams Mike Piazza ever saw included one team that turned the World Series into something personal. It happened in the year 2000. Mike Piazza stepped into the batter's box against Roger Clemens, and the air felt heavy with old anger. A few months earlier, Clemens had thrown a fastball that hit Piazza in the head. It gave him a concussion. Fans did not forget it. Piazza did not forget it either. Now, here they were again, on the biggest stage in baseball, the World Series, with the whole country watching. In Game 2, Piazza swung at a pitch and his bat shattered into pieces. The broken barrel of the bat spun toward the pitcher's mound. Clemens picked it up. Then he threw it, hard, right across the path where Piazza was running. It flew close to him. Both teams stormed out of their dugouts. It looked like a fight might break out on national television. For a moment, baseball stopped being a game and started feeling like a real conflict between two men who did not like each other one bit. But here is the thing people should remember. Piazza did not back down. He kept playing. He kept swinging. In that same World Series, with all that tension hanging over him, Piazza batted .273 and hit 2 home runs. That takes nerve. That takes real toughness. Piazza was not just a great hitter. He was a man who could stay focused even when things got personal, even when the whole world seemed to be watching him and waiting to see if he would crack. If stories like this get you fired up, use the hype feature and give this video some hype, because the teams Piazza had to face only get bigger and tougher from here. That night against Clemens was not some random moment. It was one small piece of a much bigger story. Mike Piazza spent his whole career standing across from some of the best teams baseball has ever seen. He caught games against powerful lineups. He stepped into the box against some of the most feared pitchers in history. Because he did both jobs, catching and hitting, he saw greatness from every angle a baseball player can see it. Today, we are counting down the 5 greatest teams that Mike Piazza faced, watched, or was even briefly a part of during his career. Each team on this list earned its spot in a different way. Some were built for the long grind of a season. Some were built to win in October when the pressure is highest. By the end, you will understand exactly why Piazza's own greatness looks even bigger once you see who he had to go through to earn it. Before we start counting down, it helps to know a little about the man at the center of this story. Mike Piazza was not supposed to become a star. He was picked in the 62nd round of the draft. That means 1,390 players were picked before him. Almost nobody believed in him. Scouts barely noticed him. He was seen as a favor pick, nothing more. But Piazza turned that tiny chance into one of the greatest careers a catcher has ever had. He played 16 seasons in the major leagues, from 1992 all the way to 2007. Most of those years were spent with 2 teams, the Los Angeles Dodgers and the New York Mets. He also had a very short stop with the Florida Marlins, and later played for the San Diego Padres and the Oakland Athletics near the end of his career. By the time he was done, he had hit 427 home runs. He had a career batting average of 308. His adjusted OPS, a number that measures how much better a hitter is compared to everyone else in the league, sat at 143. That is an elite number for any hitter, and it is even more amazing for a catcher. Being a catcher is what made Piazza's view of the game so special. Think about it this way. Most great hitters only have to worry about their own swing. Piazza had to do that too, but he also had to think like a coach every single game. Before he ever stepped up to bat, he had to study the other team's hitters and help plan how to get them out. That means he had to understand exactly what made a great lineup dangerous, because it was his job to stop it. Then, when it was his turn to hit, he had to face some of the toughest pitching staffs baseball has ever produced. So when we talk about the great teams of Piazza's era, we are not just talking about teams he read about or watched on television. These are teams he studied up close, teams he battled against, and in one case, a team he actually wore the uniform for, even if only for a few days. His era in baseball was also changing fast. A new system called the wild card had just started, which meant more teams could make the playoffs, and it became harder to win it all. Offense was way up across the league, with more home runs than ever before. At the same time, pitching was changing too. Instead of one starter trying to pitch the whole game, teams began building strong bullpens with relief pitchers who could get just a few important outs and hand the ball to a closer. Great teams had to be strong in every one of these areas to win it all. Piazza's rookie season gives us a good starting point for understanding just how high the bar was set around him from the very beginning. In 1993, he was the unanimous choice for National League Rookie of the Year, hitting 318 with 35 home runs and 112 runs batted in for the Dodgers. That same year, the Toronto Blue Jays put together one of the great offensive seasons in baseball history, winning back-to-back World Series titles behind a lineup that finished first, second, and third in the American League batting race. Piazza entered the league right alongside that kind of offensive standard, which meant he had to learn quickly what it took to compete at the very top. The way teams built their pitching staffs was also changing fast during these years, and that change matters for almost every team on this countdown. In 1996, the New York Yankees began experimenting with a young relief pitcher named Mariano Rivera as a bridge between their starting pitchers and their closer. That idea, using one dominant reliever to handle the middle innings before turning things over to a shutdown closer, ended up reshaping how championship teams were built for years afterward. Teams that once needed their starting pitcher to go deep into a game could now lean on a strong bullpen to protect a lead and shorten the game. This shift shows up again and again throughout our countdown, and it helps explain why some of these teams were so hard to beat once they had a lead in the late innings. With all of that in mind, let's start the countdown with team number 5. Number 5 on our list is the 1997 Florida Marlins. This team is a perfect example of how quickly a baseball team can go from nothing to champion if it is built the right way. The Marlins were still a fairly young team in 1997. They did not have decades of history behind them. What they had was a manager named Jim Leyland and a general manager named Dave Dombrowski, who knew exactly how to put together a roster that could win in October, even if it was not the flashiest team all season long. Florida built its roster around strong pitching and clutch hitting. Kevin Brown was one of their top starting pitchers, and he had a record of 16 wins and 8 losses with an earned run average of 2.69, which is very good. Al Leiter also pitched for that team, their closer. The pitcher who comes in to finish games and protect a lead was Rob Nen, and he saved 35 games that year. On offense, Moises Alou was a major power threat, hitting 23 home runs and driving in 115 runs. Gary Sheffield and Bobby Bonilla brought veteran power to the middle of the lineup, and a young shortstop named Edgar Renteria was just getting started on what would become a long career. What made the 1997 Marlins special was not just talent. It was timing and toughness. They became the very first wildcard team in baseball history to win the World Series. That means they did not even win their own division that year, yet they still found a way to win it all. In the playoffs, they beat the San Francisco Giants. Then they faced the Atlanta Braves, a team that had won 101 games that season, and Florida beat them too, 4-2. That alone tells you how good this Marlins team could be when the games mattered most. Then, in the World Series, Florida faced the Cleveland Indians and needed a full 7 games to finish the job. Game 7 went all the way to the 11th inning before Florida finally won the championship. Now here is where Piazza's story connects to this Marlins team. Piazza was not with Florida during that championship season. His connection came about a year later, in 1998. At that point, contract talks between Piazza and the Los Angeles Dodgers broke down. The Dodgers decided to trade him, and they sent him to the Marlins, along with another player named Todd Zeile. In exchange, the Dodgers got Gary Sheffield, Bobby Bonilla, and Charles Johnson from Florida. So Piazza suddenly found himself wearing a Marlins uniform. But Piazza's time in Florida did not last long at all. He spent only 8 days and played just 5 games as a Marlin. Around that same time, the team's owners were breaking apart the very roster that had just won a championship, selling off players to save money. It was almost like watching a machine being taken apart piece by piece, right after it had just done something amazing. Very quickly, Florida traded Piazza again, this time to the New York Mets, in exchange for 3 other players. So Piazza never got to experience that Florida World Series title as a player on the field. Instead, he arrived just after the celebration had ended, right as the team was being broken down. It is a strange and interesting connection. He briefly belonged to one of the most impressive quick championship builds in baseball history, even though his stay was far too short to call him part of that title run. Still, the achievement of the 1997 Marlins stands on its own. They proved that a team does not need decades of tradition to win a championship. They proved that smart roster building, a strong bullpen, timely hitting, and a manager who knows how to handle pressure can be enough to beat far more experienced teams when it matters most. That is why they earned the 5th spot on this list. It is worth remembering just how tough the road to that title actually was. Beating a 101-win Atlanta team in the NLCS was no small task, since that Braves group was one of the most feared postseason opponents of the entire decade. Then, surviving a full 7 games against Cleveland, capped off by extra innings in the deciding game, shows a level of composure that few young franchises ever get to display so early in their history. Florida did not back into that championship. They earned every single round of it against teams that had every right to feel confident going in. Florida showed the world that a team could be built quickly and still survive the pressure of October. But surviving in October is only one kind of greatness. The next team on our list did not need to survive close games. It simply overwhelmed opponents with raw offensive power, night after night, all season long. Number 4 is the 1995 Cleveland Indians, and this team might be the scariest lineup on our whole list. The 1995 season was shortened because of a players' strike, so teams only played 144 games instead of the usual 162. Even with fewer games, Cleveland put together one of the most dominant seasons in baseball history. They finished with a record of 100 wins and only 44 losses. They won their division by 30 games. 30 games is an enormous number. It means almost nobody was close to catching them. What made this team so frightening was simple. There was nowhere for opposing pitchers to hide. Cleveland led all of baseball in runs scored with 840. They led baseball in team batting average, hitting 291 as a team. They led baseball in home runs, smashing 207 of them. And they led baseball in slugging percentage, too, at 479. Every single one of those numbers puts them at the very top of the sport that season. Let's talk about the players who made this offense so dangerous. Albert Bell had one of the greatest seasons any hitter has ever had. He became the very first player in baseball history to hit 50 home runs and 50 doubles in the same season. That had never happened before. He also drove in 126 runs and posted an OPS of 1.091, which is an incredible number for a hitter. Bell was not alone. Jim Thome, who would go on to become one of the greatest home run hitters ever, batted 314 with 25 home runs and an on-base percentage of 438 that season. Manny Ramirez, still early in his career, hit 308 with 31 home runs and 107 runs batted in. Even the veteran-designated hitter Eddie Murray was still producing at a high level, batting 323 with 21 home runs and 82 runs batted in. At the top of the lineup, Kenny Lofton set the table by stealing 54 bases and scoring 110 runs. Carlos Baerga added more contact hitting from both sides of the plate, batting 314 with 15 home runs and 90 runs batted in. Think about that lineup from top to bottom, from the leadoff spot all the way down to the very bottom of the batting order. There was almost no place a pitcher could relax. Every single hitter in that order could hurt you in a different way. Even with all of that offensive firepower, Cleveland still fell short of a championship that year. They lost the World Series in 6 games to the Atlanta Braves, a team we will talk about a little later on this list. Atlanta's pitching staff was simply too strong, and it proved that even the most explosive offense in baseball can be slowed down by great pitching when the games matter most. Still, the legacy of the 1995 Indians is not about that World Series loss. It is about just how frightening that lineup was during the regular season. To this day, that Cleveland offense is remembered as one of the benchmarks other great offenses get compared against. If Florida proved that a team could win through smart roster building and tournament toughness, Cleveland proved something completely different. They proved that raw power alone could turn an entire season into a runaway victory lap, even if it could not guarantee a championship at the very end. Winning a division by 30 games is almost a different sport from how baseball usually works. Most divisions are decided by a handful of games, sometimes coming right down to the final week of the season. Cleveland made the race look easy, and they did it while playing a shortened schedule because of the players' strike that year. That combination of dominance and consistency, night after night, is exactly why this Cleveland lineup is still talked about as one of the scariest groups of hitters ever assembled on one team. Huge offense like Cleveland's is one path to greatness, but it does not always win the title. The next team on our countdown shows what happens when a team does not have the flashiest regular season, but instead becomes almost unbeatable exactly when the pressure is highest. Number 3 brings us back to where our story started, the 2000 New York Yankees. This is not the most talented Yankees roster in our countdown. In fact, on paper, they were far from perfect. During the regular season, they finished 87 wins and 74 losses. Late in the year, the team dealt with tired players, injuries, and stretches where the offense went cold. If you only looked at their regular season record, you might not guess this was a championship team at all. But October is a completely different story, and this Yankees team knew exactly how to handle it. They went on to win Major League Baseball's first World Series three-peat in 25 years. That means they won 3 championships in a row, something no team had done in a quarter of a century. And the way they finished off that 3rd title in a row came right through Mike Piazza's own team, the New York Mets, in a series that became known as the Subway Series because both teams were based in New York City. This is where the story from the very beginning of our countdown comes back into focus. Remember that moment with Roger Clemens and the broken bat? The one that created so much tension between him and Piazza? That was not just a random dramatic moment thrown in to grab attention, it was the emotional heart of this entire matchup. Clemens had hit Piazza in the head with a fastball back in July of that year during an earlier game between the two teams, and it gave Piazza a concussion. When the two of them finally met again in the World Series, the tension between them exploded into that bat-throwing incident in Game 2, where Clemens grabbed the broken part of Piazza's bat and threw it near him as he ran down the baseline. Both dugouts emptied onto the field. Despite everything, Piazza did not fall apart. He kept competing at a high level throughout that series, batting .273 with 2 home runs. That is real mental toughness, showing up and performing well, even while dealing with a rival who had already put him in danger once that year. What made the Yankees so tough to beat in that series, and really throughout that entire era, was how well they handled close games. Every single game in that World Series was decided by 2 runs or fewer. 3 of the 5 games were decided by just 1 single run. That is almost unheard of. It shows how evenly matched the two teams were and how the Yankees found a way to win the tightest, most stressful moments again and again. Derek Jeter was named the most valuable player of that World Series. He batted an incredible .409 with 2 home runs during the series. At the back end of the bullpen, closer Mariano Rivera did what he always seemed to do in big moments. He shut the door late in games, protecting small leads and making sure the Yankees could turn a close contest into a win. This Yankees' success was part of a bigger shift happening in baseball at the time. Teams were starting to realize that games could be shortened by strong bullpens. Instead of relying only on a starting pitcher to go deep into a game, teams like the Yankees built a bridge of strong relief pitchers who could take over in the middle innings and protect a lead all the way to Rivera at the end. This strategy made it incredibly hard for opposing lineups to get comfortable because they rarely saw the same pitcher enough times to figure him out. So while the 2000 Yankees were not the most dominant regular season team on this list, their ability to win under pressure, to survive close games again and again, and to overcome the emotional weight of a personal rivalry with Piazza is exactly what earns them the 3rd spot in our countdown. There is another lesson hidden inside this Yankees team, one about roster depth. A team that wins 1-run games over and over is not usually a team with just 1 or 2 stars. It is a team where the bottom of the lineup and the back of the bullpen are just as reliable as the top of the order. When a game is decided by a single run, every hitter and every reliever matters, not just the biggest names. That kind of depth, spread out across the whole roster, is exactly what allowed the Yankees to keep winning those tight, tense games against a Mets team that pushed them in every single contest. The 2000 Yankees knew how to survive pressure in short bursts during October, but there is another kind of greatness that comes from doing something over and over again for years, wearing down every single rival in your path through sheer pitching brilliance. That brings us to a team Piazza had to face again and again throughout his career. Number 2 on our list is the 1999 Atlanta Braves, and this might be the team Piazza had the most complicated relationship with. Throughout the 1990s, the Braves were the team that everyone in the National League had to get past. They won 14 straight division titles during this stretch, which is an almost unbelievable run of consistency. The 1999 season was one of their very best, as they finished with a record of 103 wins and 59 losses, beating out Piazza's own Mets team, who won 97 games that year, by 6 games in the standings. The heart of this Braves team was their pitching staff, one of the greatest groups of starting pitchers ever assembled on one roster. Managed by Bobby Cox, with pitching coach Leo Mazzoni shaping the staff, Atlanta had 3 future Hall of Fame starters, all pitching together at once. Greg Maddux went 19-9 with an earned run average of 3.57, Tom Glavine went 14-11 with an earned run average of 4.12, John Smoltz went 11-8 with an earned run average of 3.14. On top of those 3 legends, Kevin Millwood broke out that year, winning 18 games with an earned run average of 2.68. Imagine facing a team that could send out that kind of pitcher almost every single night of a series. There was almost no break for opposing hitters. Atlanta was not just about pitching either. Third baseman Chipper Jones had an incredible season, winning the National League Most Valuable Player award. He hit .319 with 45 home runs, 110 runs batted in, and an OPS of 1.074. A team with that kind of pitching depth and that kind of offensive star power was almost impossible to beat over a long season. The rivalry between Piazza's Mets and Atlanta reached its highest point in the 1999 National League Championship Series. a 6-game battle to decide who would go to the World Series. Piazza was not even fully healthy during that series. He was dealing with a concussion and a badly sprained thumb, injuries that would have kept many players out of the lineup entirely, but Piazza stayed in the fight. In Game 6, with the Mets facing elimination, Piazza came through with one of the most memorable hits of his entire career. He hit a game-tying 2-run home run off John Smoltz in the top of the 7th inning, tying the score at 7. Think about that for a moment. He was hurt, facing one of the greatest pitchers of his generation in an elimination game, and he still delivered exactly when his team needed him most. Atlanta eventually won the game in the 11th inning by a score of 10-9, when pitcher Kenny Rogers walked in the winning run with the bases loaded, sending Andrew Jones home. It was a heartbreaking way for the Mets season to end, but it also tells you everything about how thin the margin was between these two teams. A team does not need a walk in the 11th inning of a knockout game unless the other side is putting up one of the toughest fights imaginable. Piazza's personal battles against individual Atlanta pitchers also show how tricky this staff could be. Against Tom Glavine, Piazza actually did very well over his career, batting .343 with an on-base percentage of .452 and 6 home runs across 84 plate appearances. Glavine liked to throw pitches away from Piazza, using an outside changeup, but Piazza's swing let him drive those outside pitches toward right center field, and he punished Glavine for it. Greg Maddux was a completely different challenge. Against Maddux, Piazza only hit .239 with an on-base percentage of .250 and just 4 home runs across 72 plate appearances. Maddux attacked Piazza on the inside part of the plate instead, using movement that jammed him and made it hard for him to turn his hips and drive the ball with full power. That difference between how Piazza handled Glavine compared to Maddux shows just how deep and varied Atlanta's pitching attack really was. Even a great hitter like Piazza could be neutralized by the right approach. Atlanta's combination of elite pitching depth, a true superstar hitter in Chipper Jones, and years of sustained dominance over the division makes them the second greatest team on this list. They represent a different kind of greatness than any team we have talked about so far, the kind built on constant, grinding excellence year after year, rather than one great moment. This was not the only time Atlanta's pitching gave Piazza trouble either. A few years earlier, in 1996, the Braves swept Piazza's Los Angeles Dodgers 3-0 in the playoffs, holding the entire Dodgers team to just 5 runs across those 3 games. Piazza himself managed only 3 singles in 10 at-bats during that series. Put those two series together, the 1996 sweep and the brutal 1999 battle, and you start to see a pattern. Atlanta's pitching staff was not a problem Piazza faced once. It was a problem he had to face year after year, across 2 different teams, for most of the decade. Atlanta had incredible pitching depth and years of relentless consistency. But the number 1 team on this list did not have just one strength. It combined nearly everything: elite pitching, a deep and disciplined lineup, and a bullpen that shut the door late in games, into one nearly complete package. Number 1 on our countdown is the 1998 New York Yankees, and this is the team the research describes as the most complete roster of the entire era. If Cleveland's strength was pure offense and Atlanta's strength was pure pitching, the 1998 Yankees were strong almost everywhere at once, which is exactly why they sit at the very top of this list. The numbers from that season are almost hard to believe. The Yankees finished the regular season with a record of 114 wins and only 48 losses, a winning percentage of .704. Their run differential, meaning how many more runs they scored than they allowed, was plus .334, one of the largest gaps ever recorded in modern baseball. They scored 965 runs and allowed only 631 all season long. That regular season dominance carried right into the playoffs. The Yankees went 11-2 in the postseason and finished off the year by sweeping the San Diego Padres 4-0 in the World Series. Add it all together, and that Yankees team won 125 games across the regular season and postseason combined. What made this team so complete was the lack of any real weakness anywhere on the roster. On offense, they were led by Bernie Williams, who won the American League batting title that season, along with Derek Jeter, Paul O'Neill, Tino Martinez, and Scott Brosius. This was not a lineup built around just 1 or 2 big power hitters. Instead, it was built on discipline, patience at the plate, and consistent contact hitting up and down the entire order, which is a big reason why they led the American League with 965 runs scored. Their starting rotation matched that same kind of steady excellence. David Cone won 20 games and lost only 7 that season. David Wells won 18 games and lost only 4, and he even threw a perfect game that year, a game where no opposing batter reaches base at all, which is one of the rarest achievements in baseball. Andy Petitti added 16 wins that season as well. Partway through the year, the Yankees also added another strong starter, Orlando Hernandez, giving them even more pitching depth heading into the postseason. Behind all of that starting pitching sat one of the best bullpens baseball has ever seen. Setup relievers Jeff Nelson and Mike Stanton handled the middle innings, wearing down opposing hitters and protecting leads before handing the ball over to closer Mariano Rivera. Rivera converted 36 saves that season with an earned run average of just 1.91, allowing only 12 earned runs across the entire regular season. Think about how difficult that made things for other teams. Even if you managed to battle back against the Yankees starters, you still had to somehow get through Rivera at the end, and almost nobody could do that consistently. Here is where Piazza's story connects once again. Piazza joined the Mets through a trade in May of 1998, right as this incredible Yankees machine was rolling through the American League, and eventually the entire sport. He arrived in New York City at almost the exact moment this powerhouse team was putting together one of the greatest seasons in baseball history, right across town. He did not need to imagine what dominance looked like. He could see it every single week in the same city he now called home. For a player still getting used to a brand new team and a brand new city, that had to be a strange feeling. Across town, a Yankees team was putting together one of the greatest seasons any club has ever had, filling headlines and drawing enormous crowds, while Piazza was just beginning to settle into life with the Mets. 2 years later, those two paths would finally cross directly in the World Series. But back in 1998, Piazza's introduction to New York baseball came with this towering example of excellence, playing out just a few miles away, a constant reminder of exactly how high the standard had been set in his new city. What separates the 1998 Yankees from every other team on this list is balance. Unlike Cleveland, they were not dependent purely on their bats to win games. Unlike Atlanta, they were not defined only by their starting rotation. Unlike the 1997 Marlins, their success was not primarily about a short, hot stretch in October. And unlike the 2000 Yankees, they did not need to overcome a mediocre regular season to prove themselves in the playoffs. The 1998 Yankees were dominant everywhere, all season long, from opening day through the final out of the World Series. That complete, all-around excellence is exactly why they stand as the greatest team that Mike Piazza witnessed during his career. Compare this Yankees lineup to Cleveland's for a moment. Cleveland's power was concentrated in a handful of huge names in the middle of the order. If a pitcher found a way to slow down Bell, Thome, and Ramirez, there was at least a chance to survive the rest of the lineup. The 1998 Yankees did not give opposing pitchers that kind of escape route. Their hitters worked patient at bats from top to bottom, driving up pitch counts and wearing down starters, so that even when the biggest names in the order were kept quiet, the rest of the lineup could still find a way to win the game. That is a much harder team to defend against over a long series, and it is a big reason why this Yankees roster is remembered as having almost no weak spot anywhere on the field. Each team on this list represented a different kind of greatness. Florida showed that fast roster building and tournament toughness could produce a champion. Cleveland showed what a truly frightening offense looks like from top to bottom. The 2000 Yankees showed the value of composure and experience when games are decided by the smallest of margins. Atlanta showed what sustained pitching dominance looks like across years of division battles. And the 1998 Yankees showed what happens when a team has no real weakness anywhere at all. Through it all, Mike Piazza was never just a bystander. His career crossed paths with every single one of these teams in a real and personal way. He caught games and had to plan against powerful lineups like Cleveland's. He stepped into the batter's box against Hall of Fame pitchers from Atlanta's dominant rotation. He fought through injuries to deliver one of his career's biggest hits against the Braves. He stood in against Roger Clemens and the Yankees during the most intense World Series of his life. And for a handful of strange, brief days, he even wore a Florida Marlins uniform, arriving just after their championship celebration had ended. When you look at the level of competition that surrounded Mike Piazza throughout his career, his own greatness becomes even easier to appreciate. He was not just a great hitter playing in an ordinary era. He was an unlikely star, a former 62nd round pick, standing right in the middle of some of the most powerful, complete, and unforgettable teams that baseball has ever produced. Think about how different these 5 teams were from each other. Florida relied on quick roster building and a manager who knew how to handle short series. Cleveland relied on raw offensive power spread across an entire lineup. The 2000 Yankees relied on composure and a bullpen that could lock down close games. Atlanta relied on a pitching staff so deep it produced 3 future Hall of Famers at the same time. And the 1998 Yankees relied on total balance, with no obvious weakness anywhere a rival could attack. No two of these teams won in the same way. And that is exactly what makes this countdown so interesting. Greatness in baseball does not come from one single formula. It comes in many different shapes, and Piazza had to find a way to compete against every single one of them. It also says something important about Piazza himself, that he never simply disappeared against these teams. Even in the moments when his own team came up short, like the heartbreaking finish against Atlanta in 1999, or the tough World Series loss to the Yankees in 2000, Piazza still found ways to leave his mark on the games. He hit the home run off Smoltz that tied a series he had no business even playing in, given his injuries. He hit 2 home runs in a World Series against a Yankees team that had just thrown a piece of his own broken bat at him. Those are not the moments of a player who simply survived great competition. Those are the moments of a player who matched it, swing for swing, even when his team ultimately fell short. That is really what this whole countdown is about. It is not just a list of great teams. It is a picture of exactly how high the bar was set during Mike Piazza's playing days, and proof that he belonged on the same field as every single one of them, standing across from history at nearly every turn of his career, and rising to meet it far more often than not.